In our previous episode, we covered the Battle of Adrianople, where the Bulgarian ruler crushed the army of the Fourth Crusade, killing or capturing its leaders, before being assassinated himself soon after. These events sent a shockwave through the entire region, as countless lords were involved in the desperate scramble for power. How would the new leaders cope with this dangerous environment, and which claimants would solidify themselves as the dominant power over the rest? You missed the chance to help stop the chaos of the 13th century showcased in this video, but you can still fight against the chaos of the 410th century, and the sponsor of this video, Warhammer 40k Lost Crusade, is eager to give you that opportunity. This visually impressive game, officially licensed by Games Workshop, features many heroes of the Warhammer 40k universe, all of them fully voiced. You're a commander of the Primaris Space Marines, and have to recruit troops and upgrade them to win in epic PvE and PvP battles. The game is being constantly improved, and with a new update, players can join one of the 4 Space Marines chapters. Each chapter has its own different buff, base design, and chapter skills. We've always been fans of the Raven Guard, as their clandestine warfare style is the one we enjoy most. Blend with the shadows and use your increased crit damage to annihilate enemies. Lost Crusade is a great game to play casually on your phone and with your friends online, as joining a clan is a great way to win. Support us and play this awesome game. Click the Rally Your Chapter link in the description and choose your favorite chapter to get the Emperor's gift and collect more resources for their battle barge in the game. Use our code Kings and Generals to redeem unique rewards. Tell us in the comments which chapter you're going to choose. The assassination of Nikaian managed to halt the avalanche of Bulgarian conquests against the Latins. However, the Kingdom of Thessaloniki, which was more powerful than the empire itself, faced another crisis. In an attempt to win over the local populace, Boniface favoured his infant son Demetrius, who was seen as more legitimate since his mother, Margaret of Hungary, was a former Byzantine empress. When Boniface died, the kingdom passed not to his eldest son William, but his newborn, with Margaret acting as regent. This, however, angered the Lombard lords, who held fiefs in his name all over Greece, and they rebelled. Emperor Henry of Flanders tried to be lenient and called the nobles to Ravenica in May 1209 in an attempt to resolve this issue, but most of them didn't show up. A 2-year war ensued, ending with an uneasy peace as the rebel nobles and their Templar supporters were defeated. Many were starting to see that this new Latin empire was unlikely to last, and while they swore oaths of fealty to Henry instead of the new Kingdom of Thessalonica, ruled by an infant boy, most lords were only after their own self-interest. The Principality of Morea and Despotate of Epirus were vassals of the Latin Empire, but that same year they became vassals of the Republic of Venice as well, granting them generous trade rights in all of their cities. Despot of Epirus, Michael I Comnenus Ducas, in particular, was trying to play each side, converting to Catholicism, but at the same time ransoming Alexius III from captivity in order to gain a claim to the throne. Meanwhile, the ruler of Nicaea, Theodore was desperately trying to enforce his own claim by annexing other successor states. After absorbing Phrygia and Philadelphia, Theodore allied with the Seljuk Sultanate of Rum and attacked the Empire of Trebizond, which was attempting to take Nicomedia from the Latins. The Empire of Trebizond was led by 2 Komnenoi brothers, supported by Georgia, and despite having the best claim, they were forced to become vassals to Henry of Flanders in return for military aid in the form of 300 knights. The Nikaian advance was stopped at Heraclea, and Trebizond responded by launching a punitive raid against Theodore Wascaris. However, the 300 Frankish knights separated from the main force and were soundly defeated in an ambush. The tides turned, and in 1208, Nicaea took Heraclea, Kytoros, and Amastris in quick succession. On the European side of the Bosphorus, the Bulgarian throne was usurped by Nikaian's nephew, Boriu, who quickly married the Cuman queen, giving rise to the theory that the assassination and usurpation were both part of a pro-Cuman plot. This forced the legitimate heir, Ivan Asen II, to flee from Tornovo and take refuge in the Principality of Halik at the age of 14. This disputed succession caused several nobles in Bulgaria to break off, including Boryu's cousin Alexioslav, who became the despot of a small realm in the southwest and received the backing of Emperor Henry. Boryu knew that he had to enforce his rule and decided to attack the Latins. He managed to surprise them by attacking the Latin camp near Beroe. There the Latins took heavy casualties, as a hail of arrows killed many of the knights who didn't get a chance to put on their armour. The Bulgarian cavalry attacked the flanks, and the emperor was caught by a lasso, but just as disaster was imminent, a knight cut off the rope and shielded his liege. Over the next 12 days, the Latins retreated to Philippopolis in good order, but still taking many casualties along the way. Finally, once they approached the city, Henry took a stand and formed up his line. Around 3,000 warriors remained, several hundred of which were knights, against 30,000 Bulgarians, of which 7,000 were Cuman mounted archers. Boryu tried to mimic what his uncle had done at Adrianople 3 years prior, but this time the Crusader army did not fall for the trap. Marshal Geoffroy de Villehardouin used his heavy cavalry to repel a charge, and the open fields allowed the Latin cavalry to compensate for its small number and inflict heavy losses on the Cuman riders, who had trouble fighting in the summer heat. The day belonged to the Latins, but both sides took heavy casualties, and hostilities ceased for a few years. After the military approach failed to give Boryu the stability he craved for, he attempted to consolidate his power by persecuting the Bogomirs, summoning the synod in Tornovo in 1211, where he personally led the debates against the heretics, which were very similar to the Cathars in southern France, who were massacred in the Albigensian Crusade during the same period. That same year, Boryu managed to secure an alliance with one of the breakaway Bulgarian states under a man named Strez, and established an anti-Latin coalition made up of the despotates of Epirus, Strez and Nicaea. Boryu and Strez launched a campaign against Thessaloniki and assaulted the city while Henry was fighting Nicaea, but despot Michael changed sides once more to aid the Latins, and the Bulgarians were soundly defeated at the city. Meanwhile, the recently ransomed Alexius III wanted to make a comeback, and he allied with Seljuk Sultan Khosrow I, who had recently taken over Antalya. Together, they marched at the head of a large army, totaling around 10,000, against the Nikaians, who brought 2,000 cavalry along with 800 mounted Latin mercenaries. The Seljuks laid siege to Antioch on the Meander, which was critical to the whole region. As soon as Theodore learned that the city was about to fall, he ordered a forced march, leaving the baggage train and carrying just a few days' rations in a desperate attempt to relieve the siege. Alexius III and the Sultan abandoned the siege and rode out to meet the enemy in a narrow valley where they couldn't deploy their full force. As soon as the two armies met, the Latin cavalry rushed into the enemy centre, crushing many archers and slingers. It then pulled back and charged again, but this second charge was less deadly as the soldiers got into a formation, withstanding the charge before surrounding and slaughtering the Latins. The Seljuks kept on advancing, and at the edge of victory, Khosrow I scanned the battlefield, searching for Theodore Wascaris. The two rulers met, and Theodore was struck with a heavy blow by a mace and fell from his horse. The Sultan barked orders at his servants to carry the pretender away, but suddenly the Nikaian emperor cut down the rear leg of the horse and decapitated the Seljuk leader. His head was impaled on a lance, and the sight brought terror to the remaining army, which retreated back to Iconium. Nicaea was victorious, but was unable to pursue the enemy as they had sustained heavy casualties themselves. The ultimate prize was the capture of Alexius III, who was stripped of his imperial insignia and spent the rest of his days in a monastery. This finally gave Wascaris the legitimacy he needed to claim the title, but there was a long road ahead. Henry did not underestimate the severity of this threat, and used the opportunity to strike at Nicaea in October 1211. After a day-long battle, the Nikaians could not defeat the heavily armoured knights, and Henry pushed as far as Nymphion. This successful campaign led to the Treaty of Nymphion, which solidified the Latin position on the coast of Propontis, as well as some islands, but ended their vassalage over the Empire of Trebizond. The latter clause of the treaty meant that the Latins weren't protecting Trebizond anymore, a cunning move that allowed Huascaris to make up for the lost lands by annexing most of Paphlagonia. That same year, the Seljuks would take Sinope and kill David Komnenos, who led the defense of the city. Shortly after, his brother Alexius managed to retake it, but misfortune struck again as he was captured during a hunting expedition. The Emperor of Trebizond was then brought in front of the city walls and was tortured in the sight of its inhabitants until they opened the gates. Alexios was ransomed, and the Empire of Trebizond became a vassal of the Seljuks. Despite the fact that Trebizond retook the Byzantine lands in Crimea, it would never again be a contender to the throne. The defeat at Philippopolis and Thessaloniki, along with the truce with Nicaea, ended Boryu's ambitions, and he married his daughter Maria to Henry, while becoming his vassal and returning the lands Kauyan conquered in Thrace as her dowry. Bulgaria was once again in the sphere of influence of Constantinople, and would be inherited by Henry's heir. Boryu continued his diplomacy by marrying another daughter to the King of Hungary, Andrew II, and this approach was incredibly successful in helping him retain his power. Henry sent troops to aid Bulgaria in its unsuccessful invasion of Serbia, while Andrew took Vidin after the local Cumans rebelled against Boryu and then returned the city to the Bulgarian Tsar. The only disturbance of this relatively peaceful period was Epirus retaking Thessaly, Dyrrhachium and Corfu while everyone else was distracted, but the status quo wouldn't last. In 1215, the ruler of Epirus was assassinated. In 1216, Pope Innocent III suddenly died. A month later, Emperor Henry was killed by poison, possibly by one of the Lombard nobles, all of which destabilized the region once again. When the new Pope, Honorius III, called for a fifth crusade to retake Jerusalem, Hungarian King Andrew II was the first to answer the call, mustering the largest royal crusader army in history, which was transported to the Holy Lands by the Venetian fleet. The Latin Empire held a new election and chose Henry's Peter of Courtenay, who was the husband of Henry's sister Yolanda. He was consecrated as the new Roman emperor outside the walls of Rome by Pope Honorius III and began his journey to Constantinople. Meanwhile, in Bulgaria, a pro-Bulgarian faction who financed and staged an uprising against Boryu replaced him with Ivan Asen II, who returned to his homeland with Rus mercenaries and blinded his uncle. Once on the throne, the new Tsar proved to be very different from the rest of his dynasty, as he did not pursue a war with any of his neighbours and maintained the truce with the Latins. When King Andrew II wanted to return to Hungary by land, Ivan Asen II declared that he would allow his army to pass only if he marries his daughter Anna Maria. The two houses were joined, and Bulgaria was given Belgrade and Braničevo, which were exchanged for the fifth time in our story. The warmongering opportunism that Bulgaria was known for since the uprising of his father, Ivan Asen I, was now replaced with caution and diplomacy, which allowed the state to recover and rebuild while ending internal instability. On the opposite side of the spectrum, Epirus was now ruled by Theodore Ducas, an extremely ambitious man who was determined to restore the Eastern Roman Empire. After absorbing Alexius Slav and allying with Serbia, Theodore hosted what could be best described as the Red Wedding, luring the previously mentioned Peter of Courtenay with the offer of food and drink, as well as support for the Fifth Crusade. Once the Latins let their guard down, they were captured or massacred. Despite his betrayal, Theodore Ducas managed to trick the Pope into thinking he regretted his decision and would release his prisoners. Trying to save the life of the doomed emperor, Pope Honorius forced Venice to back down from the invasion they were preparing to retake Dyrrhachium. Instead, Theodore proceeded to expand in every direction, taking Neopatras and Lamia in the south, then Castle Platamon, Ceres and many other fortresses around Thessaloniki, which was completely cut off. This time the Pope excommunicated the Epirate ruler and mustered a large Crusader army at Brindisi, which made its way towards Ceres. However, the only remaining powerful Crusader state of Morea did not assist this crusade, because the same Pope excommunicated its leader the previous year for mistreating the local clergy and declaring him an enemy of God, more inhuman than Pharaoh. In Nicaea, the successful ruler Theodore Wascaris died in 1221, which led to a succession crisis between his two brothers and his son-in-law. Emperor Robert I, the son of Peter, had just taken the throne of the Latin Empire that same year, and intervened on the side of the brothers, hoping to gain land and leverage in the east. And so in 1223, the new Nikaian emperor, John III Vatasis, fought a Latin army under the two pretenders, which were decisively defeated, captured, and you guessed it, blinded. The news of the defeat reached the crusading army at Ceres, where many panicked and rushed to Constantinople to regroup and reconsider their strategy. On the way there, however, they were intercepted by Theodore Ducas, who destroyed the majority of the army. In the following 2 years, the Latins lost Thessaloniki to Epirus, and signed a treaty with Nicaea, which ceded all of their lands in Asia except for Nicomedia, only to be invaded immediately after and lose Adrianople as well. The Duchy of Morea became an independent state, and the Latin Empire was a mere prize the rest of the contenders fought over. Another desperate crusade was launched, trying to retake Thessaloniki, but the host was struck by dysentery, and those who didn't succumb to the illness returned to Italy. Theodore Ducas used this opportunity to crown himself Emperor of Thessaloniki, directly challenging Nicaea's claim, and launching a campaign which took over much of Thrace, including Adrianople. He now began planning the final step towards the ultimate goal. In 1228, the reign of Emperor Robert came to an end with his death. This was the moment Ivanasen II was waiting for. He kept faith with the Catholic Church for a decade, upheld the alliances, resisted the urge to take advantage of the chaotic situation, and married into the royal family. Now, when the crown passed to the 10-year-old Baldwin II, the Tsar offered the hand of his daughter Helen and proposed to take up the regency, coming up with a plan on how the Latins could retake the lands they lost to Epirus. The nobles began negotiations with the Bulgarian ruler, but behind the scenes, they were frantically trying to find another regent, trying to pick the lesser of two evils. They found that candidate in the 60-year-old John of Brienne, a French noble who held the title of King of Jerusalem, but not the city itself. In order to get him to accept, the Latin nobles made a bizarre agreement. John would rule as regent until the heir turned 20, but at that point, Baldwin II would be emperor in name, with effective control over only the Latin holdings in Asia, which were almost non-existent. Furthermore, John's two sons would inherit Epirus and Macedonia upon his death, and once again, neither region was even close to being controlled by the empire. Ivanasen II was furious, and instantly enacted a drastic change in policy, converting Bulgaria back to orthodoxy after 3 decades under Catholicism, and securing a marriage alliance with the Empire of Thessaloniki. Together they formed a coalition against the Latins and Nicaea. During that time, the rift between the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II and the papacy was at an all-time high, and since John of Brienne was a strong supporter of the Pope, Frederick II sent a large contingent to Epirus to aid them in their conquest of Constantinople. In 1230, a massive army assembled in the second city of the empire, ready to avenge the Fourth Crusade. But at the very last moment, Theodore changed his course and invaded Bulgaria instead, hoping to get rid of the rival he'd just allied. He was so confident in his victory that he brought his entire family and most of the aristocracy to witness his triumph. The army moved slowly, plundering villages and churches along the Maritsa River. Once Ivan II learned of this, he quickly rallied his forces and called in a small but elite Cuman contingent from the steppe, marching in front of the army with the treaty Theodore broke on his spear for all to see. The Bulgarians possessed a force of 10,000, 1,000 of which were Cumans, positioned on a hill overlooking the Klokotnitsa river, while the invaders had an army of 20,000, with a sizable contingent of German knights. The speed of the Bulgarians caught Theodore completely off guard, but he was still poised to show off his military might and reaffirm that he was the true emperor of the Romans. So he ordered his army to cross the river and crush the numerically inferior side, while his family and supporters watched from the camp. The spring crossing of the river, defended by the Bulgarian infantry, caused heavy casualties, slowed down the army, and threw it into disarray. At the critical moment in the battle, the Cuman mounted archers, who were patiently waiting on the forested hill, leaped into action. The fighting quickly turned into a slaughter, and Theodore found himself pressed between the Bulgarian line and the river he and his men barely crossed, while the nomadic marksmen decimated his rear and captured the camp. Yet again, the Cumans played a vital role in the Bulgarian success, and the majority of the enemy army and emperor's retinue was captured, except for Manuel Ducas, the emperor's brother, who fought his way back with a small force. Once again, in a stark contrast to his predecessors, Ivan II pardoned all the soldiers and followers in the enemy army and allowed them to return home, while holding on to the nobility, which he treated with respect. With just one strike, the Bulgarian Tsar annexed the majority of the Eastern Balkans, as people flocked to him and changed sides. From that moment onwards, he styled himself as the King of the Bulgarians, Romans, and other peoples. And so yet another competitor in the race to Constantinople was eliminated, and two unlikely candidates, the Second Bulgarian Tsardom and Nikaian Empire, stared each other down. The fate of the region now hung in the balance between the two. Once again, thanks to Warhammer 40k Lost Crusade for sponsoring this video. Click the link in the description and choose your favourite Space Marine chapter to defeat the enemies of the Emperor. Use our code Kings and Generals to redeem unique rewards. See you on the battlefields. The conclusion of our story is coming up, so make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button to see it. Please consider liking, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Our videos would be impossible without our kind patrons and YouTube channel members, whose ranks you can join via the links in the description, to know our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.